Hi, everyone. Welcome to Tyson Foods, Transforming the Global HR Team Member Experience. My name is Valerie Winkler. I work with KPMG. I am part of our Workday practice, and I'm currently leading the Tyson Foods engagement.
And I'm Robin Rogers. I am the leader of HR technology with Tyson, and also kind of co-leading the project with Valerie, and we're excited to have you here today.
All right, we're going to have the obligatory safe harbor statement here. So I think everybody's probably familiar with the Tyson name, but we're going to spend some time. Robin's going to talk you a little through Tyson Foods' background, for those of you that may not have as much familiarity. And then what we'd like to do for about 30 minutes is basically just talk to you about the transformation that we're undergoing and some of our key criteria for success, which includes gaining leadership buy-in, and really we focused on the employee experience, so we're going to spend most of the time talking about the employee experience and some of the unique things we've done there. And then we'll talk a little bit about hybrid collaboration, and then we're going to leave about 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. So I hope everybody will be thinking about some questions throughout. We have a microphone up here. So if you can make your way to the microphone at that end point, that would be fantastic.
All right, so a little bit about Tyson Foods, if you're not familiar. We're a multinational protein-focused company, and we supply 20% of the beef, pork, and chicken within the United States. If you're not familiar with the Tyson Foods name, you might be familiar with some of our other brands, things like Jimmy Dean. Breakfast sandwiches are one of my favorites, Hillshire Farm, Ballpark, etc. So you've probably seen, if you haven't seen Tyson Foods, probably chicken nuggets around, you've definitely seen one of our other brands around. We have close to 140,000 team members across the globe, and last year we had $47 billion in sales. So you might be thinking of us as just a chicken company, but clearly we are a lot more than that. We have an amazingly diverse population at Tyson. We have tons of languages that are spoken, not just within the US, but across the globe. But in the US, our top 10 languages are honestly pretty surprising. We have English and Spanish, but we've also got Burmese, Karen, French, Vietnamese, Somali, Arabic, Marshallese, and Laotian. So we are really solving for a lot of culturally diverse population. And it's not a guarantee that we speak a common language at Tyson at all. So we really have to understand the nuances of a culturally diverse organization. And that really has been incredibly important.
So Robin mentioned that Tyson has a lot of workers where English is not a second language or even spoken at all. I'd like to see by show of hands, like how many people also have a very diverse workforce that they're struggling with. Awesome.
Excellent.
So you came to the right session because we also would love to learn from you and hear some of the things you've been doing. So again, when we get to the Q&A, we'd love to hear from a few of you at the microphone, and we may have a little treat for you as well.
Also a bribe, treat or bribe, however you want to look at it.
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about Tyson's Workday journey. So we initially deployed just for the US in the spring of 2019, and that was about 100,000 team members out of our 140,000 team member workforce. That was a huge push for us into the digital age, but it really didn't solve our problem of a decentralized HR workforce. So by the early part of 2021, we realized we weren't maximizing our investment in Workday. We could see huge disparities in process and programs, and we could see that sometimes just by looking at our data. So for example, when we looked at how the Workday mobile app was being used, what we found was that the top 30 plants out of over 200 accounted for 60% of our Workday mobile app usage. Now that's a huge disparity. So we went and talked to those plant leaders and said, hey, you're clearly doing something different. What is it? Every single one of them without fail came back and said, yeah, well, we integrated that into our own kind of orientation and onboarding process. On Thursdays, we have them take out their mobile phone. On Tuesdays, we register for benefits, whatever it might be. But the reverse was also true for the plants that did not have any Workday mobile app usage. They had not either created an orientation and onboarding strategy, or they had not included some of the self-service technology within it. So we really wanted to be able to address and provide a clear and systemic process. We wanted to have, an enterprise philosophy on things like onboarding and orientation. We know that if we can get the 80-20 right, enterprise standard 80%, 20% localization, that really gets us a lot in the right direction that we want to go. And we knew that we needed to have that sort of enterprise philosophy if we were going to be successful moving into our shared services model that we are heading into right now.
Yeah. So through all of that, at the end of the day, by October of 2021, Tyson had aligned on the aligned purpose and understanding that they really needed to move to an HR shared services model, in addition to, and really do that prior to kind of rolling out to the rest of the world. So in October 2021, we kicked off the current HR transformation journey we're on to move into an HR shared services model. And so over the last handful of months, we've wrapped up all of our localization sessions. We figured out from a global operating model perspective what that means from a security perspective of changing things around. And we've already completed 2 of our testing cycles. And so we're wrapping that up this month with the intent to go live with that new operating model in the US in January. And we're also adding an additional 10,000 plus team members from Australia, Malaysia, and Thailand into Workday for the first time. But it doesn't stop there. As soon as we wrap that up, we will go into a second wave where we'll then be implementing the rest of the world for Tyson. So all of their other countries will be online as well. All right, so we're going to now talk a little bit about more details around some of the things we did to gain leadership buy-in throughout this journey. Then we'll talk about employee experience. We'll probably spend the most of the time there. Then we'll hit on hybrid collaboration and then open up for Q&A. So another disclaimer, here's the microphone. Be thinking about it as we go along, and we may give you some bribes later.
So when we kicked off our fact-finding mission, we knew that this was going to be a really, really big project, not just for Tyson's HR team, but for everyone who interacts with HR. And I think we would all know, if you're here from an HR standpoint, you know that that's everybody. Everyone at some point in their career is going to touch HR. So prior to getting project approval, we ended up having individual sessions with our executive leadership team, and I cannot stress enough how valuable and important that was. Where normally we would go into a great big project approval meeting and we would present our use cases and our return on investment and all of that good stuff, a lot of times that can end up with a project being squashed, honestly. And so we took a different approach and did those individual sessions. And candidly, we learned a lot of things that we would not have learned in a broader session. It also allowed them to share some of their hot rocks. And it also allowed us to do a little bit of myth busting. So early on, we heard a lot of things like, how are we going to manage things through self-service technology? People aren't going to have phones. People don't have a way to actually do self-service. We also heard things like, we're going to be asking our frontline team leaders to do too much. You can ask them to do that. It's just too much. But hearing that feedback really early on helped us be able to address it, find solutions for it, and really change our own change management strategy and head that way. So we didn't stop with just those initial project approval meetings leading up into the big project approval meeting. We've kept this going with quarterly updates to each individual ELT member. Now, I know that feels like a lot of time, and it is. It's a lot of coordination. It's a lot of getting time on calendars that are really difficult to get on with. But it really gives us an opportunity in a project like this that's honestly, it's 2 years long. We can't have a project approval meeting and then never talk to them again until 2 years later when we're saying, all right, we're done. So we want to keep that connection strong. And so every quarter we plan those updates and we again solicit their feedback. We let them know how change management is going and really give them an opportunity to collect some of that information to also share with their leadership teams. We're using it as a way for them to distribute and be change champions and supporters of that overall message.
By show of hands, how many have had a project delayed because they did not have proper leadership buy-in at some point? Yeah. Yeah. So big lesson learned here that we made sure to tackle throughout this project so that we would never be a reason for the project to be delayed. The other thing that Robin mentioned was, highlighting the wins and the challenges when we were in those ELT meetings. So it was really important not to just go in there and be like, rah, here's all the great things. We're gonna like improve self-service. We're gonna have all these awesome things, but to really like balance that with the challenges. So we knew that there would be rumblings, and what's the opposite of the self-service? People feeling like, oh, now you're asking me to do HR's job? Like, why do I have to log into Workday and do all these things? Like, that's HR's job. They should be doing it. You're asking me to like hire people? And so we knew that up front. We were able to like say like, hey, this is the expectations we have, and really have the executive leadership team be the voice and be behind it and make sure they were sharing the same key messages out to the group of what it was. And to Robin's point about myth busting, that was like one of the biggest like myth busters we had, which was today as a frontline manager, you are responsible for hiring people, you're changing their job, you're still going and having a meeting with HR. You're either typing them an email, you're walking over their office, you're trying to make sure they're available, you're writing it down on a piece of paper, but you're supplying that information to HR. So with the self-service, it's really more about changing the way you're doing it, not adding additional work. But now it's more convenient because you can do it, when it's easy and convenient for you to log into the system and do it and have those prompts. But it also helped us think through from a training perspective too, like what did they need to be able to know to be able to make sure they could, if the HR person's not asking the right questions, how is the system prompting them for those types of things? All right, so again, we were asked to do all the Q&A at the end, but I would love for you guys to think about some great wins you've had on your projects that you'd be willing to share with the group. And if you're not live yet, it could be an anticipated win. And then lastly, thinking about a challenge that you've had in rolling out Workday. And we can think through those things as well when we get to the Q&A.
All right, so moving on to our next key takeaway, employee experience, really focusing on what that experience is going to be like. So we spent several months on a fact-finding mission because we wanted to really understand facts about what our employee experience is like today and what we want it to look like for the future. So we know that there's not a high use of self-service, and we saw that on some of our business process initiation trends. If you've never used that report in Workday, it's really helpful. It gives you an overview to see what your business process initiation trends actually look like from a self-service standpoint. And mildly embarrassing to admit, but we were at 5%. So 5 whole % of transactions were actually done through self-service. The rest were done on behalf of someone. So, and we honestly knew that that was a huge portion. It wasn't anyone's fault. It was a portion of our key operating model. I mean, that was driven entirely by how we had set up our very decentralized HR workforce. The only way for a team member to get help was to physically go talk to someone. That means that they took time away from their breaks, their lunch hours, or before or after work to either try to grab someone, HR, walking around the floor, or go stand outside of their office and try to grab their time. And so let's say you moved last weekend and you want to update your address so that your pay slip comes to a new spot. You've got to write that down on a Post-it note. You've got to find them to be able to hand it over to them. And then it goes into a black hole. You have no oversight of when that address gets changed. You have no oversight about, is your paycheck actually going to come to this new address or not? And so what we're saying is in-person service can be great, but it's not great when it's your only process that you have. It can be a true hindrance. So let's give people the option of self-service. Let's give them the ability to self-serve if they're willing, if they're able, if they would like to utilize the technology. So I always say our goal is not 100% self-service. We're never going to make everyone talk to robots for the rest of their lives. We're not getting rid of HR in our plants. But our goal, honestly, if we can move the needle to like 35 to 45% self-service, that's a huge win for us. That gives us that ability to self-serve and give people that option if you want to view your pay slip after work, if you want to register for benefits on your lunch break. You can do all of those things through a tablet device or through a mobile app. And we'll talk a little bit about some tablet options that we have coming up to help us solve self-service. But really, our goal is to be able to provide some amount of self-service, and we know what a win that will be for us. All
right, so from an employee experience standpoint, Tyson CEO, CHRO, everybody has been, sharing the message in, financial reports, et cetera, that the Tyson is focused on becoming the most sought-after place to work. And so we really wanted to make sure at the forefront of all of this was the employee experience. And so part of that was thinking about our design principles as we were going in and looking at, how we were going to reconfigure Workday. We mentioned at the beginning, Tyson went live with Workday, the full HCM suite minus payroll, a few years ago. And so over 100,000 team members in the US are already live on Workday. So when we thought about the experience, it was let's put together something that's going to be really easy for the full project team to be thinking about as we go along the process of re-implementing. And so that was the right experience. It's really quick and easy to remember, but we incorporated the key messages that were already part of Tyson's core values. It was part of things that are on their public website of quotes from their CEO and other folks, but really make sure that it was relevant to the team member, intuitive. It needed to be really easy. We talked about how there's so many different languages. It's difficult to communicate sometimes, so it has to be super simple. One of our key things we hear all the time is Barney style, simple.
Break it down Barney style or Fisher Price simple. Those are kind of our key catchphrases. It has to be Fisher Price simple for us to, and that's for all of us.
So making sure it was really intuitive, good for everyone, helpful to me, and there for me. So there for me, again, having the mobile app, having it be easy for people to reference. And so we could go back to this, again, as we were designing, as we were thinking about other pieces of this transformation, like the implant technology that we'll talk about in a bit, that those were always at the forefront.
And honestly, setting a design principle like that from the very beginning, it allows us to go back to that and ask the question of, does this align to our own design principles? We also knew that this was, like I've mentioned, it's a really long project. It's a 2-year-long project. We are integrating a lot of our team members across the world into our Workday environment. We're moving to a new shared services model. There's a lot that's happening over the next 2 years. Well, we're a year into it, so over the next year. So we needed to have those right design principles in mind for us to back up against. And we also needed to have a plan for quick wins, because one thing with a project this long is you can't keep telling people, well, you just have to wait until we're done. So we found ways to integrate those quick wins into the project itself, where we didn't have to say, oh, well, you can wait until 2024. Or, well, coming soon in March of 23, you'll see that new thing. So we planned our project in a way that allowed us to have quick wins. So you'll see some of the things on the slide. We were able to integrate a new global headcount report. So using Prism, this was really one of our first Prism use cases. We had not admittedly been using Prism to the fullest of its capability, but I think we're well on our way in creating some of those use cases. Being able to pull in what was once a very manual report driven by each country sending in their headcount report at the end of the week. And then we always heard, well, it takes 8 days to compile a headcount report. So now we're able to take a quick export of data from those different countries, and it's imported into Prism. And this helps give us our very first true global headcount report. Now, it's not real time. It's not as great as it's going to be once everyone is in Workday. But again, we didn't want to wait until that end of the 2-year period to say, congratulations, here's your global headcount report. We wanted to give people a semblance of that so they could see things by country and organization right off the bat. We also did some things with internal pay competitiveness that allowed some of our recruiters to avoid a very manual process that they were using prior to this, and embedding some analytics into the process itself. So adding in those new features really helped momentum. It really helped drive our change management strategy also. It gave us a reason to communicate with our leaders and with our team members, because we were able to say, hey, as part of our what we call our Next Frontier project, here's a little dribble of something fun for you. Here's a new headcount report. Here's an internal pay competitiveness report. And we also implemented pay slips, so people being able to come in and view their pay slips, register for the bank account online. And what's really interesting is, looking at the Workday mobile app usage, we have grown from September of last year, so we're right at a year, 155%. By using some of these quick wins and using them as part of our change management strategy under our project umbrella and saying, hey, as part of the Next Frontier strategy, here's the thing that's coming to you. You'll be able to look at your pay slip. Leaders, you can see a headcount report. This really drove access into our Workday mobile app. And like I said, 155% growth over the course of the last 12 months. Has really been amazing, and it really helps continue to drive the change. And like I said, it makes people not feel like they've got to wait 2 years to see the end of the project.
One of the other things that Tyson did during this time is leverage videos. So again, because the population was already live on Workday, there were certain things we were able to like showcase, like with the quick wins to get people excited, and so they already kind of were familiar with Workday. And then there will be more that we'll leverage for the other populations that will be coming in. But again, going back to that concept of, not everybody speaks the same language. Sometimes it's easier to visually show people things. And so the ServiceNow is something else that's being implemented at the same time, leveraging their real-time translation. So that was one of the first videos that was released to really start getting people excited. Now, granted, that's not going to be available until January, but to already start showing people things that they could get excited about, because right now, there's things at the plant level that are translated locally, but really to be able to get into the technology and then see it translated, that was something we wanted to highlight very early on. So there's a lovely video out there that's already available. You'll also see one of the pictures here is the posters. So that was translated into 10 different languages. And again, it gives people a quick QR code to like log into Workday, really make it at the forefront of each of the plants so that that message is going out there. Robin mentioned at the beginning that the plants that were doing something different was really like talking about it, walking them through it like on day one as new hires, making sure people are aware of it. And so really having that out there for people, like they're on their break, they're having lunch, and they can see these little like posters or things on the tables. It'll get people talking, and then they'll know, okay, this is something that we want to log into. And then you'll see a lot of just like pictures. In the middle there, on top, is going to be the process flow, so showing what it used to look like versus what the process looks like now. And so even for the leaders to be able to show them what is really changing and have it be, people that are wearing the Tyson clothes, and makes it feel really real to the team was important. There's also a whole change management website. So all of the videos that are posted, all the key messages we want people to know about along the journey, that was a place everybody could go to throughout and be able to see that. And then, of course, just like your Workday swag, everybody likes a little bit of swag, so you can see some of the Next Frontier swag that was handed out to all of the change champions to get them excited about the project as well.
So I mentioned a little earlier about how self-service is really a huge piece of this project. So we had to think about the execution of the self-service. So we have made a huge investment in technology to support self-service, and you see that up here on the screen. We have identified very rugged tablets. We've also identified, I know this sounds a little silly, but very brightly colored cases to go around those tablets. One of the things that we found in a plant that had actually tried to solve this issue on their own, they had ordered some tablets, they found pretty quickly that tablets, which are normally black or gray, they were getting lost. They would be left like on this type of podium or a desk, and it was dark and you couldn't see them from across the floor or across the training room. So we ordered neon yellow cases to go around these tablets. So I mention this just because thinking about those small details can really help make this be a successful process. So we have those brightly colored charging cases. We've also got charging carts. So for our plants that are getting more than 10 tablets, these charging carts hold up to 30 tablets. They have nice charging cases in them. If you were a part of the elementary school age where you had a library cart that got moved from room to room, it's about the size of a library cart. because that was also one of our requirements. We wanted to make sure that this was movable. We wanted to make sure that the individual tablets were movable, that this could be set out, some baskets could be set out in the middle of a break room or a training room, and that we have them for multiple use cases, not just for that self-service where I need to register for benefits, but also use them for your orientation and onboarding, use them for when we've got a big open enrollment event, get everyone a tablet into a room. So we knew that we really wanted this self-service experience, which had been one of those big call-outs from our executive leaders. We really wanted this to be a great experience for them. And we've also been piloting some face authentication. So this was also feedback we got from our executive leadership team, that remembering passwords to get into, I know many of you probably have something like Okta for single sign-on, remembering passwords that admittedly can be a little complex, for our population has been really difficult. There's tons and tons of password resets that happen every single day. And we wanted to find a solution around that. So we worked with our IT teams to see, listen, there's got to be something out there. We know there's technology for like fingerprints or like eye scanning if you've seen a James Bond movie or something. We wanted to find something easy. And so we've been working with our IT partners to pilot our first face authentication. So meaning after they're registered with that nice little face scan, if they consent through biometrics, then that means that any tablet or Tyson device that they pick up from that point on, they don't have to remember a password. All they have to do is load it in front of their face, and then they're able to log in and see every app that they have access to. So our goal is to make this as streamlined and as painless as humanly possible, because we know that, admittedly, there are a lot of team members that come in on a day-to-day basis. We want to make this to be easy and simple and not something that they've got to remember, or it's got to be something that feels hard in their orientation.
All right, so a little bit about the numbers. We've got over 2,000 team members that are identified as change champions across 5 different kind of groups. So we have different frontline supervisor groups, leadership groups, et cetera, to make sure we are disseminating information across the entire organization, getting people excited about what's to come and making sure that they're sharing the messages. All said, when we go live with this revised version, over 130,000 team members will all be on one instance of Workday, which will be great. And then we, again, have those 4 countries that'll be part of that first wave, and then we'll add the other 30-something. We don't know because they're very acquisitive, so they're constantly
We keep adding countries into the mix, so the number keeps growing.
But to date, we've again gone through a couple different testing cycles. We've had over 130 people participate in the various testing events that we've had so far. So really excited about continuing to improve that Workday adoption.
So our last takeaway, building that hybrid collaboration. We all know that the world that we work in right now is and looks a little differently than it did 2.5, 3 years ago. So having a relationship, building that relationship and the trust that goes with it remains a huge and top priority for us. Completely requiring a virtual meeting, which for a lot of us was a requirement for a very long time. Sometimes you need a little extra time built in there. So we discovered by doing this project almost entirely virtual until here just recently when we've been allowed travel, we've been able to visit, we were able to visit Thailand actually, which was very exciting. Up until that point, everything was virtual. Every meeting, every session, every single meeting, every planning session was entirely virtual, and that was a change for all of us. And what we found was if we built a little extra time into those meetings, for some of that relationship building that I think you sometimes naturally get when you're in a room with someone and you stop and say, hey, can I grab you a coffee? Or, hey, walk with me down to the water cooler and let's chat for a minute, like the traditional water cooler chit chat. You miss some of that. And so you have to find a way to make up for that in a completely virtual session. So we always say adding a little bit of extra time onto that meeting can really, really be helpful, but also not underestimating the value of being in the same room. Here recently in the spring, we were able to meet for the first time and bring some of our KPMG consultants into the same room, and we were able to come in and have a great working session week. But I also look at all of the amazing work that we were able to do completely virtual, and it truly had been seamless up to that point. So it's fantastic to be in a room, but there's also ways for us to make it work in a virtual environment.
Yeah, and I think for those of you that are doing a global implementation as well, if it's like based in the US, As you know, every country or different regions of the world have very different working styles, and really being able to meet and have those relationships, the buy-in of we're in it together, here's how we're gonna work together, was really super important. So there is that balance of, what you can do virtually. If you have the opportunity to be able to do some FaceTime to help build those relationships early on, if you didn't know them before the pandemic or before travel was restricted, that's really important to just keep things going strong throughout. One of the other things we did was combining shorter focus sessions to prepare key players. So we're in an environment now where you want to be inclusive, make sure nobody feels left out, people are invited to things, and you've probably all experienced this where you have meetings every second of the day, triple booked meetings, because everybody wants to meet, because you need a scheduled time in order to meet since you're not in person. But you also want to make sure people don't feel left out, and so you over-invite. And so it was really about thinking who's required, who's optional, how can we make sure the information is disseminated. But if you're going to have these longer meetings, think about some of the key outcomes or key big decisions. Meet with the smaller group of key players, make sure we're all on the same page with what those big decisions are, so that you go into the meeting already have that pre-baked, and so you can spend a little less time when you're with that broader group. It makes everybody else happier because they're not in a gazillion meetings, but also it makes the meetings go smoother when there's at least been some pre-conversation about what you're trying to get out of it. The other thing is expect that not everybody's going to be in the room. So again, even if it is virtual, people are busy, we know that. Really think through what is the outcome you want from the meeting, who really needs to be there, and make sure you're leveraging required versus optional. And then if you do have a required person, they can't be there, they're sending a proxy if you need some governance from a particular work stream, as an example. All right, so the time has come for Q&A. We have this lovely microphone up here. Would love for folks to walk over. Peter, I see you're back there if you want to come up so we can all hear you. And anybody else, if you think about some of the questions we had, some of the challenges, would love to hear your stories as well. Particularly those folks that mentioned they've got a pretty diverse workforce. If you've done something that we could learn from, we'd love to hear that as well. And we have some candy to bribe you, so.
Yes. Listen, first bribe is Reese's or a Snicker. I am not above it. For anyone who comes to the microphone, you get to pick. You made it first, you get to pick.
Candy it is. Hey, thank you so much for this presentation. Justin Mocker, I'm with Curate Retail Group. Curious about the translations piece. It's an area we've struggled a little bit. We're actually just looking into ServiceNow's translation capabilities. So can you talk a little bit about how you're doing that, and then more importantly, how accurate are you finding that translation to be?
Yes.
Thank you.
Got a lot of answers for that. So with ServiceNow, that does hook up to Google Translate, which is basically an AI translation capability. I would say spend a little time Googling. I don't know exactly what languages you're targeting. I'd say it's really pretty accurate for something like Spanish, French, and German. What we have discovered is that for something like Thai, it's not as highly rated for Thai, and I'll give you an example. We were setting up in Workday for our team members in Thailand the ability to track vaccine status and number of shots in Workday. And so we sent off the labels of the fields and sent them through Google Translate, and we got them back. We loaded them into the tenant, and then we went through unit testing. And we got feedback that, hey, that word actually says bullet. It didn't translate to vaccine shot. It translated to vaccine bullet. And everyone was very concerned about why we were asking them about bullets. So I would say for words like that, and sometimes they'll sneak up on you, for words like that, they can really bite you. There were also some scenarios where we had notifications that would say, "Dear team member," and it took that phrase and translated it to something that was borderline romantic, like a step past romantic. And so we got feedback, hey, you're gonna have to stop. But what we ended up doing was even though that translation wasn't perfect, it was a starting point for us, and it was certainly easier than going to our team members in Thailand and saying, hey, we want you to translate these hundreds of knowledge articles, these hundreds of field labels, all of these notifications. It was a lot easier for us to say, all right, we're gonna push everything through Google Translate. There's also a glossary feature in there, so we were able to correct that scenario where, like, vaccine shot, we were able to correct that, or bullet, sorry, we were able to correct that to say, number of shots instead of number of bullets. That was handy. So you have a way to keep that updated and corrected, like through that Google glossary that they have. But I think admittedly, part of our change management strategy is saying, hey guys, this may not be perfect. Some of the fields may not be perfect. But when we run it through Google Translate, we hand it over to our teams. It's really more of a spot check at that point, as opposed to saying, you've got to read these 100 notifications and these 200 articles and these 600 field labels, and you've got to translate them from scratch. It makes the process a lot faster. So I think did I get everything in your question there?
You did.
Okay, perfect. You sure you don't want some candy? Okay.
Very good afternoon. Thank you for the presentation. It was really enlightening. My question relates to the operating model that ultimately supports the delivery of the technology. Could you tell us a little bit about how your operating model changed in order to make the employee experience, better, easier, more seamless? What is it? Whereabouts did you feel the pressures in your teams? Just, I'm sure a lot of us can relate. Those that have implemented kind of tech, Workday or any other tech stack, it really has an impact on the operating model. So I'm keen to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and tell me if I don't answer your question all the way, but I think our transition, and we're almost there, we'll go live with our transition into our new shared service model in January. But it is a huge change for us. We have individual business units, poultry, prepared, et cetera. And part of the downside of being so decentralized is that we had little pockets in different business units, different HR business units. So like the HR business unit for prepared foods had sort of its own little learning team, and the one for poultry had its own little onboarding team. And so that's why you had a really inconsistent experience. And that was feedback we got from our team members, honestly, that hey, I go to this plant down the street and it's a poultry plant, but then I decided we were going to move across town, and so I'm starting at this plant, and the onboarding experience is completely different. So I think one of the good things out of this is that we're going from a very inconsistent experience for our team members to a very consistent experience for our team members. We know it's going to be a process. It's going to be a little clunky here in the beginning as we are really pushing for people to be supporting from either that like tier 1 generalist area, picking up the phones, answering chats, but also giving people an opportunity to specialize in things like leave of absence or benefits or compensation. So really giving them that opportunity to specialize in those areas and help team members where if we can't answer it at tier 1, we can get you to the right place for someone who can answer it. Did I answer all of your question, or was there anything that I missed?
Yeah, thanks for that. I was also curious about things like your position management or, for example, your job rec type process, which are quite complicated processes. And as a result of that, we've found we needed to resource up in those areas to try and support the managers. So I'm also keen to explore that angle as well. Yes,
position management has, either option has its pros and cons. So to be clear, I'm not stomping on position management by any means. We do use position management, and we actually just closed 66,000 vacant positions about a week ago. So I'll be the first to tell you, we were not staying on top of keeping our positions clean, to full and fair. And I think out of this, we are prioritizing a report out of Prism that will help us better stay on top of the positions that are vacant and open, just because we have so much hiring, so much turnover that goes through this. So I don't know that I have the perfect answer for how we're going to manage position management. I think we're on our way towards it. Because prior to this, we sort of had an occasional yearly or bi-yearly cleanup where someone would go, man, there's 20,000, there's 50,000 positions out there. What are we going to do with that? But I think we're on our way with moving towards a shared service. You get towards a point where you have a shared responsibility, and people don't see it as, well, these are my 100 vacant 6 months positions. And these are my 200 ones. I'm not as worried about that because they don't see the holistic picture. And I think us moving into a shared service model helps us see that holistic picture. And there's a shared ownership at that point as opposed to a plant level ownership of it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I bribe you with candy?
You can. The Snickers would be great.
Okay. Would you like me to toss it at you?
Yeah, go on.
Okay. Well done.
Good job.
Great presentation, thank you. My name is
Thanks.
Peter Pereira from Boeing. Just got a few questions. You went live in April 2019,
That's right.
then you started your transformation. So when you went live first time, did you go on your own or did you have a partner?
We did have a partner in 2019. It was with Deloitte.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is, as you triggered the transformation, did you have an end state in mind? Part A. Second B, how did you measure success along the way?
Let's see. Well, I think the end state is that we want a global operating model, and this is really our first step into that. We know that it's not going to be sudden, that we're not going to flip the switch and have everyone in Workday and suddenly be in a global operating model. We know that that's our goal, and we want to get there, but we've got to measure that. We do have a lot of ways that we're measuring success. So a lot of what KPMG helped us with in the beginning was doing sort of a current state assessment, helping us understand where we were. That's where I know, that benchmark of, hey, we're at 5% self-service. And then us deciding kind of what our goal was, which was to move the needle to 35 to 40% self-service. We also did things like time to hire or time to fill applications, breaking it out by corporate versus frontline hiring. We did a lot of things around how quickly we can fill things like report requests, ad hoc report requests out of Workday. We actually want to decrease the number of those types of requests that we get. So that's sort of our goals within this too, of we want people to start using those reports in Workday that we've built for them that are honestly fantastic and beautiful, and we want them to go to those and self-serve as opposed to asking for those one-off questions. So we have a list of, I want to say like 50 to 60 different measurements that we've captured along the way that we are building kind of our return on investment reporting strategy right now, where everything we captured in the beginning, we've been building reports along the way so that we're able to capture that and track that over time. Because a lot of times in projects like this, you can go live and everyone says, congratulations, you're done. And we don't want to lose sight of the work and the change that we have along the way.
And part of that assessment, too, was not only just looking at Workday and how it was kind of built and like what could we optimize to come up with that list of quick wins, but really talking to, we did some surveys, focus groups, et cetera, to find that, we mentioned there's all these different plans. They were all doing things kind of differently. So even now, as we focus on the future and talking about, hey, here's the great new process, we can't really do like this is the old versus this is the new, because like every plant was kind of doing their own thing. Some people were like continuing to do old manual processes. So those were some of the things that we found, and that helped us kind of prioritize to say, as part of moving to shared services, we know we're going to touch pretty much all 142 business processes that are in the Workday system, because we had to change security and do all of those things. But what are some of those quick things we can start delivering out to the plants now that they can start leveraging, or that maybe some were leveraging and others weren't, so that they can start to see that progression? And so we kind of highlighted the ones that were like easier, quicker to do, but that also weren't going to substantially change, because what we also didn't want to do was train somebody on a new process and then a few months down the road be like, okay, just kidding, we're going to do something different now. So we were very thoughtful about how we rolled it out and which ones we selected.
Would you like a candy that I can bribe you with? Are you sure? Okay.
Hi, thank you so much for this presentation. My question is if you have unionized population, and if so, if you follow a different strategy to implement the self-service.
How we're gaining buy-in from the unions? Was that right?
Yeah, what is the strategy for the unionized population specifically?
Yeah, so we do have a huge number of our plants that are unionized, and we did go through our labor relations and team member relations groups to make sure that the types of changes that we're doing don't impact any of those labor agreements. For the most part, and I'm speaking kind of broadly here, but for the most part, those agreements didn't include like the number of HR people that might be on site or dictating how someone might be serviced, whether it was through self-service or through having like an HR person on site. So for the most part, we've been able to really move forward with our transformation with pretty minimal impact from a union standpoint. Most everyone has seen this as a positive step, especially because we're able to give them a huge number of tablets. In a lot of cases, that's something that a plant may not have wanted to invest in. I mean, we're spending millions on sending out, tablets and charging carts and everything else. And that may not have been in a plant's budget every single year to invest in something like that. And so for the most part, it's been seen as a very positive experience that we're going to be sending out the technology that's going to support the self-service, but not really seen as, we did have a little bit that myth busting in the beginning of, oh, our team members don't have mobile phones. That was something we got in the very beginning. And so we showed them studies like from the Pew Research Center that said, hey, even as a couple of years ago, 80% of people who reside within the United States have mobile phones. We also went out and did surveys and to several of our different plants, I think about 15 different plants, and we went to every single team member. And our HR people were great. They would put a tablet and they would say, all right, let's answer these questions. And it was like 96% of our team member population in those 15 plants indicated that they not only had a phone, they had a smartphone, and they were using either Wi-Fi or a data plan. So we weren't asking them to utilize anything out of hours, and we weren't asking them to utilize anything personal unless they wanted to.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Georgia, Smithfield Foods. Thanks
Hi.
again. Hi. I wanted to ask also about your change management approach related to reskilling your HR organization. I can imagine you went from administrative partner
Yes.
to, influencer, analytical thinker, I hope, right?
Yeah.
So how did you approach that change?
So you want me to take that one?
Yeah, I'm going to just do a quick hygiene thing because we are just out of time. Would love for you guys to give us some feedback on the app. We are going to stick around, so if there are other questions, we'll be here, but we might get kicked out here in just a bit.
And I would say for upskilling our HR team members, you're right, that's a huge undertaking. We have hundreds of our HR team members that are moving from plant roles where they essentially become sort of remote workers in a way. Some of them may still be in a plant, but they won't be supporting individual activities, and we did that through a systematic way. Honestly, we removed their ability, or will be removing their ability, to do things like address changes, add someone to go on LOA, because that's the only, we know that everyone has a kind heart and is helpful, and if someone comes to you and they're like, hey, I moved, can you just update my address for me? They'll do it. So the only way to really drive that shared service was to remove that ability for our HR team members to execute on behalf of a team member, with the exception of a few key scenarios like talent and performance and things like that. So we are investing in a lot of training so that especially what we would call our tier 1 HR agents, so we probably have 270 HR professionals that are moving into what we consider that tier 1. And they've got to understand kind of a broad aspect of HR, not just the things that they've answered for their plants. And so we've had change champion meetings with them. We have a very robust training schedule with them where we're building, I think it's 94 videos, if I remember right, like 94 very short form videos to really learn about each individual process. We've also invested in technical writers that have come in and helped write a lot of knowledge articles from the perspective of a team member, but also from the perspective of an HR person. And we're investing in writing standard operating procedures. So we really wanted to hit the gamut there and hit everyone and make sure if I'm a team member, I've got really clean, short descriptives about what I need to do. But if I'm in HR, I might need a little more information so that as I'm going through and I'm answering that phone, I may not know how to add someone to LOA. But if I type LOA into the search bar, the first thing I'm going to get is an HR relevant article that says, here's how you take someone and put them on LOA. These are the things you need to ask them. This is what you need to capture from them. So we're really treating this as a long-term training event, and it's helping build what our training events will look like in the future as well as we onboard new HR team members. And can I bribe you with candy? Okay.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining.
And we'll be
I know
over
we're
here.
at time. Again, we'll hang out, so if anybody has questions, we can take it offhand.
Thank you, guys.